There's no way to know. Yeah, you should try it, experiment, and then say, oh yeah, it works for me.
I'll let out Chris.
You try it, suppose.
It's not said that.
Thank you. Thank you. No, no, no. I've got it on that now.
Exactly, yeah.
We got a little bit of a late start. Still eating.
Just a little update from your sponsor.
Ron is good.
So you got my email, sorry, I went.
It ended up a little sooty.
It did.
You want to sit here?
No, no, fine.
Why do you think that is? I've never been one.
I think it was too big for the manual water.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'll respond tomorrow.
Yeah.
Could have done with another 30 minutes in the
Oh.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, that's got AC in your house.
It's all ready.
AC. You never turn it on.
You had it this way. Well, there was one summer that we had, it was above 110 for like 3-4 days in a row.
Then you turn it on.
Yeah, then you would turn it on, yeah. It's good to have it for those days.
Actually, our thermostat turns so that if we drop below 50, it heats it on. It goes above 95.
Oh, that's good.
But it is 86 or something outside.
You
Sorry,
get
it was
enough,
75. So
yeah, so you get enough of a breeze coming through, it's not so bad. That's good. Better get good insulation.
we got great insulation.
You don't speak until you do. If it's there.
Nice down.
Oh, it's really put that in there.
Wow, this ginger cake thing, Aaron, is delicious.
It's really good.
Really.
That's
Who
Nancy.
made the ginger cake?
Nancy.
Oh, you did?
But I used Jenny's recipe.
Well, I'll take credit. I was rolling with it. I was rolling with it.
She was quite happy to roll with that one. You said you made it with what?
I just thought you were suggesting it.
I just made a recipe with it.
Well, gluten-free flour.
But it does have brown
Which
sugar.
gluten-free, the red milk?
I don't know, yeah,
The Trader Joe's has gluten-free flour. I noticed the other day.
Yeah.
For $3.
yeah, Bob's stuff.
Oh, okay, Bob's red milk. And the recipe was from Bob's red milk? Their website, they have recipes.
Jenny's, it all goes back to Jenny. The good-
It's so old, I don't even know where, it's just from some.
All good things come from Jenny.
Yes, all the desserts are, all the desserts.
It all goes back to you, Jenny. Another one of your good deeds.
Well, we are online.
We're online.
Playing our kids.
We're starting.
Where am I?
So funny. You like me? Okay, I don't mind you.
He's really been thinking about time recently.
Uh-huh.
I understand the nowness of time and the falseness of the past and future. But there seems to be ways of looking at it which are more useful than just now. Which is something like, there is what's happening now, but there's also something like what's happening always, even though it's now. Looking at what's happening in this room now seems to be subtly different to what's happening in the universe now. Intellectually, I know there's no difference, but conceptually there is something that is different for me in my head between those two nows. Does that make sense?
Well, I hear a couple of issues there. One about now versus what's always now, and another about now here versus a now a bigger here.
Things are bigger. I mean, there's always now, there's always now.
Right.
But there seems to be an understanding of little now and big now, which is different somehow.
And see, I don't think there can be any understanding at all. It's entirely mysterious and miraculous, and you know, for me, I look at it, and it's completely unresolvable to the point where any of my ideas are hopelessly, stupidly simple. Mind you, I can see it all different sorts of ways, but again, all these different ways of seeing it don't actually seem to resolve into anything coherent.
Well, that's the now that is unresolvable. But past is not unresolvable, I think, and future is not unresolvable.
Well,
I can't know what they are, but I can grok it somewhere.
I don't see that because, you know, what past and future are is, you know, essentially an aspect of the mystery of what now is, and what that is, you know, it's obvious in one sense, in the sense that it's actual, but it's what it is and how it is to any degree whatsoever just seems completely bizarre, you know, so hopelessly bizarre and hopelessly unresolvable, in the sense unanalyzable, you know, and all of these different aspects and parameters of it that seem to be, you know, sort of intuitively or empirically in terms of looking at it various different ways. I think none of them stand up because they all end up, all you end up with is this, and yeah, and even if it is now is open to question. I mean, we're used to thinking of it as now, but again, since a now can't be resolved as now, you know, even holding it to be now, holding that notion to be in any sense useful or meaningful, is a little shaky.
But can you not see this? I can get my mind around a then or a past, which I don't actually believe.
Well, I can conceive of all kinds of things, but I can't resolve it. I mean, if I go looking at the past and how that works, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't resolve. It doesn't, you know. I mean, there seems to be events which happen, obviously, in the present, and there's only the events that are happening in the present, and yet there seems to have been other events that have been happening in the present that appear differently than the events that are happening now, even though the events that are happening now are totally unresolvable. And one can anticipate that there will continue to be more events in the future analogous to the events that are supposedly in the past, which is just another way of saying that this has looked different than it does now. But the phrase "this has looked different than it does now," if I go looking for what it is it's just woo! It's just endless weirdness, you know. To the extent that it's obvious that, you know, there is what we call, you know, the flow of time or the flow of events or something, but the obviousness stops there in terms of what it is or how it is or even if it is. It looks as if it was like that, but then, you know, you can't. I can't go any further than that. You know, this is what it is as it is, and even though it's completely actual and completely obvious and empirical, every aspect of the way it is what it is, and even what it is, how it is, and what it is as in being what it is completely, you know, you can't answer the questions. You can't, you know, and it's befuddling because so much of it seems so obvious. You know, it's obvious that, you know, there's a flow of events, and it's obvious, you know, all these, there is time and there is space, you know, but this obviousness doesn't stand up to scrutiny. The obviousness is it stands only on this, and what this is can't be resolved, and the way in which this obviousness happens can't be resolved, and, you know, so again, the obvious resolves to complete mystery or miracle or, you know, question mark, whatever.
I think it's only befuddling because all those time and past, future, and now is just that they're ideas. And
well, they are ideas, but the ideas are based on an actuality which is endlessly weird.
right, but I don't think that actuality has anything to do with those ideas at all.
Well, that's what I was saying.
Well, that's a lot of question, I guess. But I think like the now is interesting because it's pretty easy to see there's no past. It's pretty easy to see there's never been any future. But now is only a reflection of those never was, never will be. So
It's
just,
not even that. It's not necessarily a reflection of anything. It is this.
intellectually, in
Oh, yeah.
that concept.
Right.
So it's just so for us to think of now in the moment is just a remnant of that old idea, really. This doesn't depend on that idea in any way that I can see.
Sure.
And so,
similar reflections can be made about space, can be made about any quality whatsoever. You know, that it seems real obvious that the common sense view of it seems real obvious until you look at it at all, and then it just gets endlessly
well,
mysterious.
it falls apart, but it also opens up, and that's the part that it opens up into. I keep coming back to the word motion. It's the only one I've got at all. There seems to be something that is, you can say it's unresolvable. It has that collapsing quality, like it's unresolvable. So it collapses into it's an always motion of collapsing into itself, so to speak. So I mean that's just more silly ideas, but the opening up part is what I'm interested in the sense of.
But even that can't be found. You can't find an openness or an opening or anything.
Yeah.
You know, all of these notions, when you investigate, turn out to be about this, and as soon as you move from the notions to this, woo, there's nothing to hang your hat on. There's nothing resolvable whatsoever. Even though this is actual, you can't even say what that is. You can't actually find actuality, even though it's completely obvious. In fact, that's possibly the only condition, the strongest condition you can say about this is that it's actual, i.e., it is. But then you're just completely left there, because what does that mean? Compared to what? You know, how? You know, and all these questions are just, again, completely absurd. This is what it is and how it is, to the extent those notions are relevant, which is anybody's guess. You know, this is real. This is reality. This is undeniably so. That's the powerful fact, but you can't go beyond that fact. That fact is bad. You stop there. You can't go anywhere with that unless you go back into imagination again, unless you go back into abstraction.
Well, let me try it from a different angle, because I totally agree with what you're saying. It's obvious, but if there's a kind of playing with something, there's a kind of it seems to keep occurring. You know, maybe that's just, it doesn't feel conceptual at all. It feels, in fact, I can't even find any substance at all. But it feels like, if anything, consciousness maybe, which doesn't exist either, but there's a kind of playing with it. I can't do anything but play with my hands here. That seems to have, well, it's an interaction. Do you know anything what I'm trying to say?
Well, you know, one can spin endless metaphors and models and sort of, you know, more or less, creative expressions that relate to this, and it's no doubt that they do relate to this in some sense. But again, you can't ever resolve them or the way in which they relate to this, because again, as soon as you come to this, you can't go any further. You cannot go any further than this, and it does not resolve. It does not. It does not explain. It does not resolve. It does not. You know, it is what it is as it is, and that's the only fact. You know. And you know, as soon as you try to elaborate on that, you spin back into models and metaphors and innuendo, which doesn't get you anywhere, because the best that can do is bring you back to this. So departing from this, just to come back to this, doesn't, you know, there's nothing gained. Yeah. And yet this, again, is not inert. It's not mechanical. It's not dull. It is pure intelligence. It is pure meaningfulness. So it has endless profundity in what it is. But that profundity is not a profundity that lends itself or generates analysis or resolution. It's a profundity that is for itself, in itself. And again, if you try to steal some of that profundity or intelligence or meaningfulness and abstract it into form, you can do so, but you will have departed from this, and you'll, no matter how sophisticatedly, still be in some sort of a, innuendo, which can at best only refer to this. And so you haven't actually gained anything. You just come back to this.
I see what you're saying.
And coming to this in the first place is the end, or the beginning, if you will. It's the source. It's the only destination. It's the only goal. It's the only, prize. It's the only actuality. And so coming to this is, coming to this and appreciating that fact that this is the finality is as good as it gets. And if you don't appreciate it, if you try to abstract it, you're going to just spin off and keep cycling back and forth and back and forth. But every time you come to this, you won't have gained anything. You won't have lost anything, so it's cool. But the height of wisdom is to get that this is it. This is really it, and that's the end. That's bang. That's the finish line. It doesn't go. It doesn't. It's not like this is it, and it's not. No, this is it, and that is the end and the beginning and the eternity, and it's always been the case and always will be the case, and blah 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 blah. But having said all that, you haven't said anything, because you can't prove it or demonstrate that or deconstruct it without spinning off back into more bullshit. That this is real, that this is actual, is completely self-evident, I think, probably to everyone. But to appreciate the finality of that, to appreciate the comprehensiveness of that, is what realization consists of. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay, yeah, yes, yeah, okay. Bang. End of story. Beginning of story. Whatever. Who cares? Fuck it. But this, bang. That's it. And then you can, by all means, you can play with it and analyze it and write about it and talk about it and think about it. But you don't get anything from doing that. And that's the conceit. That's the fallacy that, let me just play with this or tweak it, or maybe I can really milk something out of it that's going to be really great. It's like, no, the greatness is this. The milking is always a lesser version. Pseudo. The milking is this as well, so it's not lesser or greater than anything. But it never adds to anything. Nothing is gained. Nothing is augmented. Nothing is achieved by departure. Nothing's lost either. So that's again, it's sort of a moot point. But
thank you.
But that this is what it is mind-boggling, because what it is not a simple thing or a simple condition in any sense. It is, it's intrinsic. You've heard me say this many times. It's intrinsically transcendental, which means it transcends itself. It just endlessly has infinite dimensionality intrinsically in itself. Not as elaboration, not as addition, not as accumulation, but just in what this happens to be is, you could basically just call it endless weirdness, just to sort of sum it up in simple terms. So, it has all of these aspects and dimensions and so on and so forth, but none of these aspects and dimensions are resolvable, so they never become anything other than this. It's not like they are aspects and dimensions, and you can list them, and they're cumulative. It's just it's obvious that this is like that, and again, you can't go any farther than that. This is just an endlessly weird condition, and this endless weirdness shows up as all, the basis for all the endless elaborations that ever have and ever will occur. But none of them actually approach this or add to this or even accurate analyses of this, because this is intrinsically transcendental. It transcends any way of being with it other than itself. It transcends any analysis or understanding or engagement or anything other than the intrinsic engagement of its being.
Which is
This.
transcending.
Which is this, yeah, which is transcending, because that's its nature. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting that you said, it sort of transcends anything, and it's just itself. Because when sometimes some of the terms that you use for this, I mean, like weird or any of them.
Technical terms.
Any of them. Yeah, they're technical.
Really weird.
Yeah, but when I'm, so when I'm noticing, when I'm in direct, direct connection, there's nothing. It's not that it's not. It's not nothing, but it's more. I don't know. It's sort of like, I know one of the Dzogchen words is rest. Resting.
Mm-hmm.
Or being bathed. But it's only there's just a little step back. That's when it gets weird and and strange. But when I'm directly there, it's the word fantastic wouldn't work.
Well, no words work. It is as it is. Yeah. When I talk about it being, weird and strange and fantastic and all these things, what it is, I'm just trying to indicate that what it is so unexpected and so uncategorizable in terms of any thing or condition that any human being has ever said or thought or put out. This is so far beyond that.
Exactly. It's just a relationship. That's what I said. When it starts applying when I just sort of, it's just a little step back. When I can be in the quote-unquote real world.
It's very easy. It's effortless, and it is already with itself, and it's absolute. There's no effort that is intrinsic. So it's complete ease and rest and effortlessness and self-immersion. Is sort of in pragmatic terms. But what it is in that, as that, is inconceivable.
That's good. No word. Yeah, right. Yeah.
But it's an inconceivability of positivity. It's not an inconceivability of reduction or nothingness or anything that cancels out. On the contrary, it has and is all qualities and infinitely more.
Yeah.
And and what that is and how that is, again, is endlessly weird and unresolvable. And even that they are qualities or whether or not they're present is all just beyond addressing. I mean, the important fact about this is it's real, and that this is it. This is the end of the line. This actuality here, and in that fact, all this other stuff is just completely obvious about it, basically. And in pragmatic terms, to really appreciate how complete and comprehensive this is. This is This really is it. This really is the end of the line. This really is, everything or whatever, the beginning, the source, the end, the goal, the whatever. Just this actuality. And to appreciate that and that fact is inestimably, unspeakably powerful. To think there's something more, there's something you need to do about it is being with it inaccurately, being with it not as it is. It's not like that. It's the end. Nothing more needs to be done about it. Nothing needs to be done or not. It's just, and it's absolutely complete. It's absolutely final. It's absolutely inclusive, comprehensive, what have you. And the appreciation of that fact allows realization, because everyone is always engaged with this, but unrealization consists of the fantasy that, wait a minute, there's something more, something I need to do with this, something I can achieve with this, some way of massaging it it's going to do something. And to get it, no, this is it. That's all. In that fact, everything is done, everything is accomplished, everything is achieved. It's just everything. It's the finish line. And when you see that, then of course it is. Without being static, without being any kind of a death or any kind of an ending or anything like that. It's pure life. It's pure creativity. It's pure, intelligence, pure consciousness. So it's great fun. In that sense, the sort of spiritual metaphor or model of surrender is appropriate, because it's, in one sense, realization is really about, this is it. I surrender the fantasy and delusion that there could be anything more, that I need to or could add anything to this, that I need to or could achieve anything in the context of this, and so on and so forth. And just this, bang, and all of a sudden, all of the onus is on this. All the onus. Not like it's helping or it's supporting you or it's, your allies. No, this is it, bang, And in that surrender, nothing has been surrendered because it's just the condition that has always been. But there's the surrender of the fantasy, the delusion, that there is some separate you that has some axe to grind or some angle or some achievement to wangle in the context of this.
Can I get back to where I was?
Of course, sorry, digression.
I got interrupted. This using time as a annoying metaphor, but there's something.
Uh-huh.
There seems to be, and using transcendent, which is an operative word, now is transcendent.
Yes, certainly.
Past and future are not, to me, transcendent. That was what I was. There seems to be a mental process that conceives past and future that isn't in the
Right. Maybe so, but the implication that mental process rests upon is in the now. Phenomena of memory exist in now. Phenomena of perception of change exists in now. Whatever that is and however it is and so on.
That does everything.
Yeah, and I would argue that, yes, I agree with you that past and future per se as abstractions are just that, abstractions, but they are, of course, based upon actuality, which is the strangeness of now, in that now is not just like a snapshot, bang. It's this continual, ongoing, strangely apparent flow of events, so-called, that has no duration and no residue. And I mean, again, you can't, have this just looking at it, you're just left hanging. Obviously, you can't go anywhere with it. But that it is so slippery and dynamic, I think, is the actuality that the fantasy of past and future is generated by, or is anchored to.
Yeah.
So, in other words, I think there is an actual basis for past and future, but it's more in the slipperiness of now and the apparent flow of events that is actual, even if it's not a flow and it's not events.
I mean, in that respect, everything is now Martians and the fantasies I had when I was a child,
right?
Things that haven't been thought about, all part of now.
Right.
But at the same time, there are my mental processes, which are mental processes, which means that they're not, well, it means whatever it means. Puts definitions onto things which are not useful.
Well, certainly, that's across the board.
But I use those definitions all the time.
Sure.
And I don't use the definition of Martian all the time, or the definition of my childhood memories all the time. But I do come back to past and future over and over again.
Well, I think that semantically those notions are bandied about a lot in terms of human interaction, because as we make plans and I'll see you at 10 and what are you doing tomorrow, and how did you like the thing you did yesterday, maybe I'll do it tomorrow, and all these kinds of notions, even though they're completely inaccurate, they're continually being reinforced and thrown out just because it's so commonplace in terms of human modes of interaction. And the fact that they're inaccurate is irrelevant because they're pragmatic. It's accurate enough to use as a working model and ignore the fact that it's absurd. Not that most people don't necessarily ignore the fact that it's absurd. They may think there's a past and future, but of course, if one looks and discovers there isn't, you can still use these models even though they're completely inaccurate, because they're not so wholly inaccurate. They have a strange semi relationality in pragmatic terms, even though they're inaccurate theoretically.
Well, I think more than inaccurate, they are approximations.
Right, that's what I was going to say, approximations.
Well, approximations are inaccuracies.
Yeah, right,
Well,
referential approximations.
I mean, they're inaccuracies in as much as they're not the totality of the now.
Right.
But to say that this cup of tea is sweet doesn't make this a completely wrong statement. That there is some sweetness in this tea. Whatever else it is, and it's not necessarily tea, and it's not necessarily what I think of it is. But for me, there's an experience of sweetness.
Sure. And this gets down to the abstraction of designating characteristics. Yeah. And even though that's inaccurate, it's still pragmatic. Yeah. Again, the main thing with all of this is with any of these abstractions, is to remember that they are approximations. That tea is actually not sweet. It's actually something way infinitely beyond sweet. Yeah. And yet, calling it sweet is a fine thing to do, as long as you don't let yourself get trapped into thinking of it as just tea that's sweet, because A, it's not tea, and B, it's not sweet. What it actually is inconceivable. And if you see that, if you know that in terms of what you're relating to yourself and it as being, that's what liberation looks like. Whether or not you can say, boy, this tea isn't sweet enough, I'm going to go put some more sugar in it.
But yeah.
Or vice versa.
I see the beyond description, but it's still sweet.
Sure.
And I think approximation is as close as I can come to it.
Sure.
And when I come to an approximation, I know that it is inaccurate.
Right.
And so I know the past is inaccurate. I'm not saying past, maybe I said, but I shouldn't have said the past doesn't exist. The past is inaccurate.
Sure.
I can't say that about now.
Sure.
Well, you can't.
Anything
You can't.
I can't say anything about now, exactly.
Yeah.
But I can say about the past it's inaccurate. And that makes
Where is it?
some sort of division in something that can't be divided.
Well, what makes a division? Saying it's inaccurate makes a division?
Saying accurate or inaccurate, I mean, these are mental things, they're not,
Well,
they're not real.
I think that it has to do with the nature of indeterminacy. I think semantic designation ignores indeterminacy,
That's right, yes.
even as it in fact is continually playing with it or dancing with it. You know,
Yeah.
when you make a statement, the fantasy, the semantic fantasy is that, you know, sweet is sweet, tea is tea, and so there is tea and there is sweet. Where in actuality that's not true. Sweet is like a point on a bell curve that stretches to infinity, and tea is a point on a bell curve that stretches to infinity, and tea and sweet are actually the whole bell curve, even as they are a point on it. You know, and the indeterminacy takes in the bell curve. The semantics just says, no, sweet is sweet, sweet is sweet. It's not anything but sweet, it's exactly sweet. And in reality, there's no such thing as exactly. Or there is exactly, but it's exactly this, which is the whole bell curve, always. And the structure of our language, the structure of our semantic systems doesn't take that into effect. Words are held to be different from it. Sweet is not sour, sweet is not salty. But in the real world, sweet is sour and sweet is salty. They're versions of each other, albeit biased versions of each other, skewed versions of each other. But in semantics, it's not acknowledged. Semantics, you know, slices and dices what's essentially a continuum. Not that it is actually a continuum, but from the point of relative to semantic slicing and dicing, it is. It may as well be.
Thank you.
I think it's a lot. You see this in science too. Forgetting margins of error. You know, this cup weighs, you know, 1.375 ounces, you know, or whatever, right? It's like, no, it doesn't. What this weighs is an infinite approximation that at some decimal is just going to keep going forever. In actuality, but we round it off. And this rounding off, as we're simplifying, this averaging, is exactly the way semantics work. You know, it's like dropping off, picking an arbitrary point of significant digits or significant data, and anything beyond that point, finer than that point, is just sort of cut off. But you throw like the baby with the bathwater when you do that, because that finer is the part that merges with the infinite. That finer is the part that merges with actuality, because actuality is intrinsically infinite, unresolvable. And as soon as you start resolving it, which semantics do, and which thought does, and which, you know, all this averaging does, you create a fiction. You create a fantasy of a reality that is discrete and resolvable, and this is this and that's that. And there's no such world in reality.
As you did when you said this cup.
Exactly.
You got onto the weight. This
Yeah.
cup is.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, actually, it seems also that all these semantics in most people's experience join together into a model.
Well, that's the problem.
It's model
That's
that,
the problem.
yeah.
That's the problem, because and then if that model is held even slightly to approximate or worse yet, accurately reflect reality, that's what delusion consists of.
Yeah.
Delusion consists of misinterpretation, which is basically any interpretation. And the actuality is uninterpretable because its terms are unresolvable with finiteness. If you know, it's useless talking about what anything weighs if you can't get the actual weight of anything, which is the actual case. You know, for example, I mean, just
You just move it around on the earth and you'd have different.
Well, yeah, I mean, whatever, but even so, even if there was such a thing as a fixed context, which of course there isn't, you know, any measurement is ultimately uncompletable, you know,
Well, the idea of a measurement is that something is this and not that.
Exactly.
And any this, not that.
Right, that's
Has to be a concept.
Exactly.
So it's, you know, but my whole life really has been about letting the light creep through this model, you know.
Sure, of course.
Swing through the cracks and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, there's basically two games in town. One is upgrading your model, and or downgrading it, and or sideways grading it, and the other is trying to see through it. And the vast majority of people seem to be busy with upgrading or downgrading or sideways grading, and it seems to be a relative minority that's interested in really seeing through the model.
If you meet the Buddha on the path,
Indeed. Another model.
You know, spelling hairs on this, but to even say it's a problem is not really accurate.
No, of course not. But to the extent there is a problem in spiritual terms, it's that, and to the extent there is a solution, is to see the actuality that consists of. It's not, of course, it's not a problem. It's just intrinsically in the nature of this that it seems to work in ways that seem to be describable as that. Endless weirdness.
I'm thinking of the old, cliche, the one without a second phrase. And actually, that's just this. But it says something about this. It says that any fuss you make about it is only part of this.
Right.
So we're stuck in this, and we don't have any choice.
Right.
There's nowhere to go.
Right.
And we're not deluded, because that would be this too.
Right.
So that's a powerful phrase, one without a second. There is no other possible position, and yet we're all running towards this.
Yeah.
Seemingly
Well, see, I think one without a second is a little heavy-handed, because the implication is that there's a one and a possibility of a second which is being negated. The way I would put it is there's one that is infinitely different than itself. So there's endless secondness, but the secondness never departs from the one. So it's a more subtle condition than a simple one without a second, which implies a one, because this is one, but it's not a simple one. It's not a one of, everything doesn't fall into just a little flash of light that stops. I mean, in one sense it does, but there's literally infinite differentiation, let's say apparent differentiation, within the one, none of which actually departs from the one. So it's a subtle and complex nature.
Well, without the second, you can't even say anything about the one.
Yeah, but it is, the power of that statement holds. The power of that statement is absolutely true.
I'm not thinking so much as it just dawned on me, not so much as a statement of truth.
Yeah.
I more or less, on faith took it as truth, but as a pragmatic thing, to catch yourself whenever you think you're lost and you have to find a way out, back to the center, or you think you have an alternative. That's all within the original one. These are all fractals or fragments.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
And it sort of stops you when you think about it. Whatever you're doing, it stops you.
Yeah, this is it. That's always, this is it. This is
I
it.
had not applied it that way before in my thinking.
Yeah.
But it's just a self-involved. It just pulls you back to wherever you think you are, you're not there. You're in the one.
Yeah.
And if there's no second to define the one by, then you can't define the one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're trapped. We're trapped in the one. And yet we think we're running towards the one.
Yeah. Except the notion trap doesn't really apply, because it's absolutely unlimitedness.
Right. I only mean that.
No, I understand. But,
there's no way we can get out of it.
and there's no we that is trapped in the one, because the one, we is a euphemism for the one, and the one is a euphemism for the we. So it's more of a semantic problem than an actual problem. It's like saying when you're asleep, if you're dreaming, you're trapped within the dream. Yeah, but you have absolute latitude in terms of the experience. But when you're dreaming, you're trapped in the dream. When you're in deep sleep, you're trapped in the deep sleep. Except the deep sleep isn't a limited thing, and dream isn't a limited thing. One, you could be trapped within the one if the one had and it was a limited thing. But since the one is unlimited, it's like saying, oh no, I'm trapped in open-endedness. I'm trapped in, infinite unlimitedness. It's like, well, okay, yeah, but in what sense could that possibly be trapped? But yeah, no, but absolutely. I mean, what you're saying is certainly true. Just that simple reflection that, this condition that is and that has always been and always will be, is where you've always been and where you always will be, and this is it. And it turns out to be pretty cool if you check it out, because it turns out not to conform to the limited ways we're used to thinking of it, which can paint it as being problematic. Well, why don't we take a little break, and be back in 10 minutes or so. Oh, she's there. Bowing to Mecca.
Yeah. That's what's wrong with it. Yeah. I mean, it says I'm gonna do it when I try to get mail. Well, sometimes it's just weak. I think it's just. How can you tell?
Well, you go here.
Can you get on the computer?
I can, because it's overloaded. The first, pretty hard for like 5 minutes, and I got some here. And then you can hear it for 2 minutes.
Oh, I don't know if you can hear.
Thank you, though. I couldn't come to.
Oh, well, that could be.
So I recorded it today.
Oh, okay. So you can do that, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I do it all the time. And it could be, it just be their streaming software, but service like that, their mobile devices.
Yeah. A PC might be able to do that.
Anyway.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, yeah, I mean, I tested him to see if he was on. Yes, see who else is.
Well, yeah, but I gotta push the button down. I never use on it, so I don't look at much, but when I have company, then I do it. Is it hot out there?
Did you see my email? Oh yes, I did. Yeah, I don't really have any thoughts about that.
Well, Ray said Lois, he doesn't like, he thought that Joe's was too conventional. I'm gonna go to Lois. I'll go to Lois.
Okay, cool.
We'll have to probably get a, I don't know if they would do it much anyway.
I don't know how this.
I'll have to talk to them about it.
Yeah,
They
sure.
didn't give us a good price.
Yeah, well, we should get at least a
But then what I wanna do is
how
how many people want to come,
Yeah.
how many people they can make,
Yeah.
and then how many people want to come in between those.
Yeah.
So if I go tomorrow over, then I'll go to Lois.
Okay, great. If it's convenient for you, that'd be great.
Well, we should come over and
Yeah, okay, cool, and whatever they say, is, I mean, fine, I mean, if you feel like it's a go, then let's just do
Yeah.
it, whatever.
And the past and the future and the time and right now and that quality. It's interesting.
Is this your one or Suzanne?
This one?
Yeah.
No, mine.
Oh,
Not the highest time,
Oh, sometimes.
whatever that
for
is.
the one you just took?
Yeah.
Yeah, timing's very, very, very strange. But then so is everything, so no surprise.
Yeah. Take a taste.
Well, in a way, I kind of disagree with that. I don't think anything is really very strange.
Get some water.
Okay.
It's all,
Shell filtering. No, well, I'll just take regular.
I was going to say predictable, it's not predictable at all, but it is always what it is.
It is always
And
what it is,
that doesn't change.
doesn't change.
So it's kind of predictable. I mean, like, you know it's going to be like it is.
Well, you know it's always going to be it, but you never know what it's going to look like. And
You never know what it's going to look
it has
like.
an infinite range of what it can look like.
But actually, that
Completely
doesn't really
unpredictable.
matter.
No, of course it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because again, it never departs from itself. It's like it's like a dream, you know. Once you get to the dream is always a dream, then
Yeah,
the fact that you
true.
can dream anything becomes irrelevant, because who gives a shit? It's just a dream. I mean, that's the powerful fact, is this never departs from itself. You know? And the fact that it can look like anything is just a way of letting go of emotionality and letting go of attachment to different ways that it can look. What about sleep? What about sleep?
And we end up
It's like,
forcing attachment on ourselves in a way.
What?
We end up kind of forcing an attachment on ourselves because there isn't any, and yet we create it. At least I create it in my daily life all the time.
yeah. Well, one of the dominant modes of the intelligence seems to be this mode of analysis and abstraction. It just endlessly is, you know, trying to sift and sort and classify.
Yeah.
The unclassifiable and the unsortable, and that's it's very quixotic. But there you go.
And it's entertaining.
It's totally entertaining, you know. I mean, it's endlessly entertaining, obviously. This is what people spend all their time doing.
Well, I like, for me, the reminder that this, that you never gain anything.
Yeah, you can't gain.
Thank
You can't lose anything. You can't gain anything. You know, and then you get that. You know, you like letting go of, because the fantasy that, you know, okay, yeah, this is it's very cool, it's powerful and all that, yeah. But then there's always a kind of a, it's easy to have a little scheming sort of a, you know, in the back of your mind, well, let's see, what are we got
Yeah,
there?
right. Coyote.
Yeah, right, it's like, ain't gonna happen.
Well, it was interesting to me because the very kind of, whatever I'm calling a movement or something, I think you nailed it. It's just that moving away into abstraction, really, and then realizing it once again. This.
Yeah, this endlessly pretends to depart from itself and return to itself without ever actually going anywhere.
That's good. Oh, not.
Well, it's all very strange.
When you say strange, use that word. It's kind of like you're using it in conjunction to the sense of, in relationship to the sense of things being sort of usual or natural or
well, in the sense of
consensus reality.
How did you say
the degree to which
How did
this
you say
utterly and completely and drastically and extremely departs from anything remotely conceivable in your wildest
We sold a
imagination.
lot, but we still got a lot,
That's what I mean
which
by
is going
strange.
to sound
It's
like
like-
zombies, right?
This is
But yeah, it was good.
You know,
Did somebody get the, I'm sorry,
it's such a, well, I'm finished. I mean, you know, obviously I can't say. I mean, as soon as I try to say what I mean by that, of course, I fail.
I
to say.
restrained myself from
You know,
responding.
this
I thought,
is
no, I don't really need, please not.
such an
I
inconceivably,
responded, but I must have been down the list. You were down the list. The figures.
I mean, this condition
If I
is
say one,
so
I'll let you
intrinsically
know.
so, it deviates so extremely and drastically from the most wild and flamboyant and extreme and imaginative and intelligent human conceptualization. It's so far beyond that. You know, that's kind of what I'm trying to indicate.
What do you want to do with it?
Of how,
I made pesto.
of how,
I used my osterizer and
I mean, this is literally virtually
My
unlimited
osterizer has a little attachment
condition,
for,
this condition.
for that.
In any way.
It has a separate little bowl.
And that's strange.
Thing that goes around.
That's pretty cool.
And
You
again,
always have that?
it's not intrinsically
Yours is
strange, it's
pretty
not
old,
intrinsically
isn't it?
anything, but it is intrinsically itself, and that itself is so far beyond the human scale of anything. You know, that's kind of what I'm trying to indicate by weird and strange and all of these sort of, all this hyperbole of, you know, how extremely this condition transcends the most anything anyone has ever thought or ever will think or conceive of or imagine in their wildest dreams. So this goes, woo, this is way beyond that. And then beyond that, and beyond that, and beyond that. And yet it is normalcy. It actually literally is normalcy. Any normalcy that anyone has ever intuited or felt or experienced is exactly this. So then that's strange. And the way that it never departs from itself, but it is infinitely differentiated within itself, is strange and weird and, you know, irrational and inconceivable.
Hey Peter, how come can it be said that it keeps you know, it's like keeps going out and out and out? I mean,
well, it doesn't literally.
Yeah.
When I said what I was talking about was that the extremity of the degree to which it transcends the wildest human imaginations of possible conditions. What this condition actually is so far beyond that.
Yeah, right.
You know, I mean, it's not a spatial beyond this. It's just, you know, it's like woo. You know, no. Way too tame, guys. Way too tame. You're gonna have to work a lot harder than that. Even be in the ballpark. What this is.
Well, it's funny because I can see that it's like other, totally other, but I can't see anything after that. It's just like other.
Well, there is no after that. I mean, that's the thing. It's just, it's endlessly other, and yet it's endlessly the same. And that's weird.
Because if you came up with another, it would just be yet another interpretation of.
Yeah.
So it's way beyond that in a very non-tangible way.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Susan. In the most simple sense, even, I mean, talking about this and trying to talk about this is a complete absurdity. You know, you're trying to talk about that which cannot be talked
We're not
about.
really talking about it.
No, of course not. Of course
Just
not.
hacking away at the fruit.
Sure, yeah, whatever.
He continues to do this all the time.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So Peter, one thing that I've been kind of trying to process is in my experience, every everything is happening so fast, and I understand now that everything is kind of like a seeming. Everything is a seemingness. And so, but you know, I don't know, I know that its actuality is a non-orientated or non-perspective.
Right, yes.
You know, but it's like I have no idea where to, because I'm always trying to focus, and I don't know actually where to put my focus now. I'm just like...
It doesn't matter. Focus doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. Focus spontaneously will find a focus. Focus moves around and settles on this and that and the other, and there's no finality. But nothing is gained or lost by focus, so you don't need to worry about that at all. It's a non-issue.
Yeah, and it's not really a flow because it feels like a roller coaster.
Sure. Yeah, there is. Yeah, because this is, in a certain sense, in a profound sense, this is a process that is doing itself.
Yeah.
And it is very dynamic in the sense that it's eventful, and there's tides and energies and moods and flavors that sort of well up like ocean currents or something. And all of the our day-to-day experience is being conditioned and buffeted by all, or literally created by all of these energy flavors that are continually changing.
So is it valid to not believe anything, any seeming?
Well, just believe that the seemings are seemings.
Okay.
And that's all that they are. And you can't say exactly what a seeming is. So it's sort of, but it's easier to cancel seemings than to cancel the million things that are what seems to be. But yeah, anything that seems to be is just a seeming. I mean, that's really powerful right there. If you can see the truth of that, then that goes a long way to unplugging yourself from believing in all of this interpretation.
You know, it feels like noticing is just noticing that everything is just a seeming.
Yeah, absolutely, sure, yeah. And that's good. That's really powerful.
Most unusual break.
Well, it's sort of not the break anymore. We sort of trickled from break into non-break. Strangely and mysteriously.
Peter, I've been playing around with Dean was sort of describing this where you forget that we're trapped here, or however you want to say it, and you go off in some fantasy, and then you have a strategy for reminding yourself, oh yeah. So, but I'm trying to stop there and say, yeah, but I don't need to go back. This is it. This is just as good.
Yeah.
This is it too. And,
right.
And catching myself right there instead of making that leap, making it right. So catching myself, and then
that's good. That's
catching the catching too. Like that's also.
Yeah.
I don't need to do that either. I mean,
yeah.
I'm just trying.
That's a more subtle and profound way to be with this. That even the departures are it, and they aren't actually departures, and so there's nothing to be remedied.
Because otherwise, you're going to always be remedying.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
That's a denial of.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's imaginary. The idea that there is anything to remedy is the only real problem.
So
There's
that's just
this.
my current.
No, that's great.
Play.
That's very good because that's very subtle
Mhm.
to be with it that way.
But there's another step to it. I'm trying to think what it is. Because even there, like, that's a correction too. So.
Well, the point is to get the corrections to be subtler and slighter and more intrinsic. So there's less and less of a needing to make a big loop. So it's just a little instantaneous right there, and eventually, this be the virtual blip, and then becomes nothing. But having the corrections get smaller and smaller is the direction to go in. And if you get to a point of non-correction, that's great. But less correction is
way more comfortable than life used to be. So.
Yeah, no, but that's the point. It's easy, because there gets to be no wrong way to do it, and corresponding no right way to do it. So all of a sudden you can just relax. It takes the tension out. It takes the, all of this sort of meta-analysis and looking over your own shoulder to see what you're doing and how you're doing it, out.
Maybe that's where that dancing quality comes from, in that sense of
The other way I worked out is to see that happening and saying, oh, I've got to not do that. I said, oh, that's not me. Knock yourself out. I'm like, you can just stay there and do whatever.
Pretty much,
Stop
pretty much
stuff
knows.
Yeah, and to me, that's very freeing because.
that's sweet.
Yeah. Because then it tends to wind down.
Yeah.
But even if it doesn't, it's okay.
Kind of like a lazy little kid,
Yeah, like there's a crazy little kid there that's just having a tantrum, okay, whatever.
That's good.
Like my dog.
Yeah, what you're describing is actually the very central principle within Dzogchen, and they have an elaborate categorization of progress or of evolution in being with that. They call this principle self-liberation or self-correction, which means that things solve themselves as problems, but intrinsically because of what they are. And the way they put this is, in the more coarse, in the more immature stages, something presents itself, and then you reflect upon it or think about it, or sooner or later you notice, oh, wait a minute, this isn't actually a problem, and then so there's like sort of a longer, bigger loop, and then eventually it corrects itself and is completely free as being a problem or an issue. And at first you have these big loops. And so at first it's a while, and then you recognize, oh, wait a minute, this is such and such, and then you recognize it, and then it solves itself. And as you make progress, the recognition comes sooner and sooner, and more effortlessly. And when you get to the advanced stages, it's intrinsic, because you come to see that the nature of what anything is such that it cannot be a problem. And so then it self-corrects instantaneously just in its being. So at that point there's no time delay, there's no loop between a problem and a recognition and a correction. It is already self-corrected because of what it intrinsically is, and that is seen a priori.
That'd be fun to read about.
But it's the same. It's exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Still be fun to read with somebody else.
Well, I'll turn you on to the book that talks about that. But you know, and this is the very essence of Dzogchen is developing skill, basically developing facility at being with this self-correction. And as you're with it, basically the little loop, the little time delay, the lag time gets shorter and shorter until it becomes intrinsic. When there's no gap at all, it's all real time. The very fact that something is appearing means it can't be a problem. And so there's no seeing it, getting sucked in by it, remembering, wait a minute, this isn't a problem, and then all of a sudden it's not a problem. So at that point there's a loop because you've been sucked in. But you don't even get sucked in, because as soon as it appears, you already know the fact that it appears means it can't be a problem. So there's zero lag time, there's zero delay, it's just instantly. It's corrected, it's liberated, as they put it, their terminology, it's self-liberated from the beginning, in other words, instantly, because of what it is. But they talk about that very thing, the sort of the time delay, or the size of the length of the loop, the process of recognition. So what you're talking about, what you're describing, is actually a pretty advanced Dzogchen. 18.
Well, a big part of that for me is like somehow I've developed some ability to see the function of rejecting whatever's going on, and let it run its course, instead of, oh God, I have to stop doing that. I have to stop rejecting things.
Right.
That's not whatever. Just like, oh, okay, go ahead. You're not separate from whatever I think is good.
Right, and that's the operative part of that, obviously, is because that's what energizes it, and you know, the logic that supports that is, yeah, no, this isn't actually separating anything from anything, so it's not a problem. So why treat it as if it was?
Yeah, he doesn't like it, but.
Yeah. And then whatever degree of loop you're in, when that kicks in, again, is your degree of maturity of being with it. And that loop will get littler and littler until it's just a real-time self-evidency, and that's what there's in zero loop. It's just always the case. Mm-hmm. What we've been talking about ties in with what we were talking about earlier. The way in which this can seem like anything, it can appear in any way, and yet it never departs. It's always itself. It never departs from itself. And again, that's the, you know, as we mature in the certainty of that condition, you know, we're thrown less and less until we're not thrown at all by different ways it seems to be, including ways we're used to interpreting as our deviations or our screwing up or our getting sucked into something or whatever. And the clearer it becomes to you, wait a minute, it doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter if it looks like me being a jerk. It's not me being a jerk. It's just this condition, which is always what it is, totally transcendentally, and nothing is gained or lost. So it doesn't matter what it looks like. And all of a sudden, that eliminates any apparent condition as being an actual problem. It's just another flavor of, you know, weirdness, another flavor of you know, experience. If you look at the spectrum of ignorance to realization, and in ignorance, we're drawing all sorts of differences. This is different than that, and we have value systems of all of it. This is worse than that. This is better than that. This is a problem. This is a real problem, you know. And as we move up the spectrum closer and closer to realization, these apparent differences get leveled, and you begin to see more and more that it's all the same thing, and the corresponding valuations of, oh, this is bad and this is worse, is correspondingly leveled to, well, it's nothing bad, nothing good, it's nothing gained, nothing lost, and then finally in realization, it's just basically it's just completely level. Oh, it's this, and there's no valuation, there's no different, you know, qualification. Even though there's infinite differentiation, it never doesn't depart in the slightest from this. It is this. And so the differentiation doesn't actually mean anything.
Well, it's infinite. That's what this
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
So it's just like it's bringing itself.
Yeah. But it doesn't depart from this. Nothing hangs nothing whatsoever hangs on what it looks like. Hangs on the differentiations.
It'd be interesting if it did.
Well, yeah, but that's the fantasy that it does, and then you're precipitated back in the hell of human gamesmanship.
Well, yeah. To my experience, it's just what can I say? It's like there's so much quality to it, you know, so much.
Endless.
Yeah, for all I can see, it's endless. Yeah. So that differences could be said to be described, but they just don't. There's way too much more of everything itself. So it just is. It's like you could say it's like mushed together, but it's much more interesting. But it's I can't, you know, and also it's not just like perception. It's like the sense of consciousness or any kind of sense of what is seeing or all that seems to be just kind of tumbling in its own way.
Yeah, it has infinite dimensionality, infinite sort of dimensions and axes of functionality and of presentation and of engagement and all of this, but all of them are it. All of them are its nature, its modes, and none of them depart from it in even the slightest. So, you know, again, it's just infinitely differentiated in every way, and yet it never departs from itself. There you go. Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Which might smoke. Nice place to be smoked. It's funny actually to me that infinite is like this is like has a quality to it. Way more than that, but it's like it's not some notion.
No, it's for real.
Yeah.
It's not the imaginary infinity, it's the actual infinity.
You were gonna off.
was thinking about the different concepts I've had over the years of what realization would be. And I think that my present position on that, if I were to try to give a definition of what I think realization would be, it would be that there is no way, absolutely no way, that I can escape from realization. There's no way I can escape from realization of truth. And the problem is I think I can. I think I can do something that would put me outside of truth, or I've already done that, and oh, woe is me, I have some karmic debt to pay, all these tricks. But I think that I would define realization of truth that way, that there's no way you can escape truth.
That's pretty good. And it's the self-verifying certainty of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Well, I'm not trying to get an A, I'm just saying.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm not grading you.
This is sort of where and of course, after hearing all your talks, because before hearing your talks, I have other ideas entirely. But that just seems to, and it also seems to imply certain kinds of practice or non-practice or, practice in quotes, not to get caught in thinking that you are not there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. No, this is really true. I mean, that's pretty succinct, actually. One of the better ways I think I've summed this up, and I think that it's just a restatement of what you just said, is that realization is the discovery of the condition that has always been and always will be the case, and that condition includes everything, is inclusive, which is another way of saying exactly the same thing.
Everything I might posit that I could do, or any conversions that I can put myself into, whatever.
Yeah, it comes with. It's included.
Yeah. Because the reason I'm even thinking about this is that I feel parts of myself still feeling off-center, that I have to get back onto the center, or I have to find the center, this is still, it's still churning around in there.
Right. And that's the very nature of relational thinking, when you're believing or orienting yourself to your experience in terms of some kind of a worldview or some kind of a conceptual overview, or basically an interpretive framework. And when you get that there's no interpretive framework because this actuality cannot be interpreted, then that interpretive framework collapses as relevant. It may or may not cease, but you no longer cling to it. And, for me, or for the way my mind works, or for my logic or intuition, the real powerful fact is that actuality is intrinsically uninterpretable. And seeing that is the laser that cuts through the delusion of the validity of any interpretation. It's like, well, if this is uninterpretable, then any interpretation, no matter how clever, is wrong. It's not about this. And, that just kind of cuts these things adrift. If you really see that, if you really see, and so that, to me, that's the whole logic behind noticing, is being with direct experience and seeing the way direct experience is, you will discover that your experience is uninterpretable. You couldn't possibly encapsulate, with unlimited resources and unlimited time and unlimited narrative skill, you could not say what the smallest portion of experience was, or how it was. You couldn't capture it. You couldn't inclusively, definitively narrate it.
Now, what in that paradigm, what squelches the doubt that maybe there's some aspect of this that I haven't seen yet that might be interpretable? I mean, how do you know conclusively that it's an infinite possibility?
Well, because I don't know. I guess the way I would the way I see it is that the common denominator of what any experience is the way every experience is.
So if you see one, clear to the core of it, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of that's a corollary of it can look like anything, but it never departs from itself. In other words, it's always the same event, regardless of what it looks like, and the very nature of that event is uninterpretable, i.e. infinite.
So if you see one,
or indeterminate, we could say.
any one facet, if you really know what that is.
Yeah. And you might be able to hold out there. Well, yeah, but maybe there's somewhere out there is an experience that I just haven't had yet, which is interpretable. I guess you could hold out for that, but to me that's a kind of insanity. Yeah. I mean, to me it's I wonder about that. It's kind of an interesting point. In what way is the infinity of experience, or the uninterpretability of experience, or the unresolvability of experience, self-verifyingly revealed? And to me, it's continually revealed in the very nature of experience itself. And the notion, but I can't really come up with an argument for the notion that, well, yeah, but maybe there's some experience that no one's ever had, but that I'm going to have in exactly 5 minutes and 13 seconds. That's going to actually be resolvable.
I mean, the irony is that we have been trying to do that for a long time.
Well, yeah.
And we haven't come up with anything.
Right. No, it hasn't been done. It hasn't been done yet.
We're further away from.
Judges are standing by.
Yeah, exactly.
So far, the prize is not being given out, though.
Well, it seems to me almost a moot point, really, because in the amazingness of it, what does it matter whether you could find such a thing? It's now, it's this, it's free.
Yeah.
So why would there?
Well, I'm looking at the specific issue of proving the intrinsic invalidity of interpretation.
But I understand. But what I'm saying
because to me that's axiomatic, and to me it's self-evident.
Yeah, it's evident.
And to me it's self-verifyingly obvious, but I can't really communicate why that's so. I couldn't really say. I mean, I'm trying to come up with an argument or defense of that, and I can't really do it.
But even looking is futile.
Yeah, turns out, yeah. It's sort of in the nature of experience, or in the nature of the observation of the experiencing of experience is intrinsically infinite or intrinsically unresolvable. So any experience is going to be like that. And the argument that, well, yeah, maybe it won't one day. Maybe not, I don't know. But that just seems, that's just such it's just a baseless assertion in the face of the actuality, which is, to me, self-verifyingly unresolvable. I mean, I think that's a very powerful and a very central fact, the intrinsic infinity of this. That's the very nature of liberation. It's the very nature of openness.
It's like, I've said this before earlier, but years ago, whatever. It's like the infinite particularity.
Yeah.
It's like
everything
is it's particular, it couldn't be anything else but what it is. Right? And it has this quality, this smell, this whatever, this nature that is
the suchness, to coin a phrase. Well, the way I put that, you've heard me many times, of course, it has an arbitrary degree of specificity and an arbitrary degree of indeterminacy.
Yeah.
You can find as much specificity as you care to look for, but every single bit of that specificity is going to be ultimately indeterminate.
Yeah.
And you can look closer and get more specificity, but that just translates into more indeterminacy.
It seems to me it's self-verifiable in the sense that that's the actual quality, that's what it is, you experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we could say, well, could there be an experience other than that? But as far as I can see, other than a thought, which is not.
Well, the idea that there could be an experience other than that is a thought.
Yeah.
And that thought might actually refer to some actuality at some point in time. You know, I don't know, I can't refute it, but
Comes down to belief again.
But this, I mean, that's the thing of it, that this actuality is not a belief. This is not a thought. This is not here because you believe it's here. It actually is here in the way that it is here, to the extent it is and to the extent that it's here. You know, and so belief and analysis just don't apply because this is real. This is actual. It's not dependent upon belief. In fact, belief is and thought is completely dependent upon it.
But as soon as you try and resolve anything,
Even resolving that it's unresolvable, it can't be resolved.
that's right.
You know. And yet that just strengthens the self-verifying verification that it's unresolvable. Because you can't even resolve that it's unresolvable.
question here, Peter.
Uh-huh.
Let's see, perhaps resolvability or unresolvability is not a category of the absolute.
Perhaps unresolvability is not a category.
Not a category of the absolute.
Well, reality has no categories. Reality is just itself. And talking about unresolvability, or for that matter, resolvability, is two abstractions that are, either useful or not to look at. But they aren't true in themselves. Nothing is true in itself other than actuality. And that cannot be said, that cannot be analyzed in terms of what it is, except in terms of itself. It is itself, and you can't say anything other than that with accuracy. So ultimately, yeah, all these things of specificity and unresolvability and blah, 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 blah are useful notions, maybe useful. But they aren't real or true in any final sense.
And sometimes you talk about it as like being a pointer, or sometimes you talk in terms of flavors or qualities. Those seem less.
Well, these things are useful to counter their alternatives. Mm-hmm. Seeing the experiential actuality that corresponds to unresolvability is very useful for undermining the fantasy of certainty or the fantasy of resolvability. If you cannot find anything within your experience that's actually resolvable, that doesn't prove unresolvability as an inherent characteristic in itself, but it disproves resolvability as a characteristic. So it's a matter of getting unstuck over simplifications. And so using these other maybe oversimplifications in themselves as tools to effect that unsticking is the point. Not that the tool is necessarily accurate. It's like the old famous Hindu saying, you use the thorn to remove the thorn, and then you throw them both away.
Peter says, thank you.
Thanks for throwing the thorn away. Or if you want to get Buddhist instead of Hindus, let's not be biased here. When you get to the other shore, you don't carry the boat around on your back, you leave it and move on. So once the boat of unresolvability has taken you where you were using it to get to, leave it and move on. There's only one fact. There's only one actuality, and that fact is that this is. This is itself. This is as it is. It is what it is. Even all those words aren't facts, but what those words are directly indicating is. And this fact right here is the fact, and it is itself. And anything you say about it is too much. It's saying too much. Even saying this is actual, or this is real, or this is it, is still too much. But it's arguably less too much than a lot of the other too muches that we toss around all day, every day. And this exists in the way that it does, period, and nothing can be said about that. So, any questions about it, ask it. Because words ain't going to do it. And fortunately, we have all access, and all access paths. Because fortunately, as it happens, you are this. Unrestricted access. Well, it's quitting time. Good night, online people.